Directly underneath the Dr. X loop player, which is just playing a simple guitar strum, we can drag an instance of the BV512 digital vocoder. So with that placed directly underneath the Dr. X player, now that we play it, we don't actually hear anything, but you can see that there is activity over here on this level meter. Let's change the vocoder mode over to being the other thing that the BV512 can do, and that's a graphic equalizer. Cool, so now we can hear the guitar. Let me just pull this master down so I can talk over it. This use of the BV512 actually allows you to split the sound of this guitar into 4 bands, 8 bands, 16, 32, or even 5 12 bands. So let's go back to 4 bands here. You can see that I can adjust the 4 bands to being at full volume, or I can completely cut out all the bands altogether. So we can just hear this band, or this band, or the very low frequencies. I could split them up to 16 bands if you like. And then I could paint across here to accentuate certain frequencies. So you're probably thinking, why the heck is there a graphic EQ in the vocoder, and why are we talking about it anyway? Well, understanding that the heart of a vocoder is actually a graphic equalizer that splits up your signal into bands is actually the best place to start in understanding vocoders. Imagine that if I took the sound of that guitar and slid all those bands up and down automatically, and get this, I was so good at it that I listened to the sound of your voice, and in my head I split up the sound of your voice into those same bands and tracked the level of your voice in each of those bands and mimicked it on the sliders on the BV512. Whew, that would be pretty amazing. Imagine doing that, taking the frequency content of your voice and modulating another sound by it. That's actually what a vocoder does. It needs 2 parts, the sound source or carrier, and the other sound that modulates those bands that we saw on the screen here. So if you got nothing out of what I just said, just remember this, that a vocoder needs 2 parts, a carrier signal and a modulator signal. In an empty rack, I'll right-click and bring over an instance of Maelstrom. I'll right-click that and initialize that to get it back to its initial position. And I'll bring up some really thick waveforms, something like these guys here. Should be good. Let's bring in the second oscillator. I'll turn that on and bring up the same guy. Maybe we'll detune that a little bit and spread it out to the max. Okay, I'll scroll down, and now I'll drop in the BV512 digital vocoder directly underneath that. So now when I play that from the keyboard, you can see that how I have activity over here, but I'm not hearing anything, just like we did before. Note that this input level is labeled carrier. What this means is that the Maelstrom is all set up ready to go, but just like we did with the guitar loop just a moment ago, all the sliders are effectively all the way down, waiting for a modulation source to tell the vocoder which sliders to slide up. A modulator source that modulates these slices or bands by the content of its sound. If the modulator sound is heavy on the low end, then the low bands will slide up. If it's heavy on the top end, then the top sliders will slide up. The modulator tweaks the bands on the carrier here in real time. So let's set up a modulator. Let's drop in an instance of the Dr. X loop player, but we're going to drag it over into the rack in a special way. Hold down Shift, and then whatever instrument you drag into the mixer will be brought across, but no automatic connections will be made. And normally when you drag something across, it'll automatically be connected up here to the mixer. But you'll notice that the Dr. X wasn't, because I held down Shift as I dragged across and hit the Tab key, and you can see that no automatic connections have been made. Now I did this for a specific reason. I don't want to hear the Dr. X, I just want to use it as a source to to go into the modulator input of the BV512. I'll select this guy here and patch it in. And if I was to turn that around and play that loop, check it out. The modulator input is coming in here and the BV512 is splitting up that signal in bands and showing us the energy level of the loop we're playing across each band, kind of like a spectrum analyzer. So check it out. If I end up playing the carrier, my maelstrom from the keyboard, its separate bands down here will be modulated by those same bands within our modulator signal. Basically, our Dr. Rex loop's spectral fingerprint will modulate the sound of my maelstrom. Now, to actually hear this, I need to go down into my tracks here and actually select the maelstrom so I can actually be connected to it. And with that being said, let's check it out. Very cool. Now, if I was to stop the loop, then all these bands will clamp down and I'll hear nothing. I actually encourage you to go over this section a few more times until it really becomes crystal clear in your mind. You have two sound sources. One is the carrier, the original sound from our maelstrom, and the other, the modulator, is used to overlay its spectral fingerprint and move the bands of my maelstrom, up and down as if I move them in an EQ mode. Now, I'm pretty fast on my feet, but I can't move all those bands up and down that quickly. The BV512 does, and it does an amazing job of tracking that spectral content of the modulator signal and then using it to control the carrier signal. Let's dial up a classic vocoder effect with talking keyboards. Let me minimize Reason, and you can see that I have a quick vocal that's sitting right here up on my desktop. You can use any audio recording application like Sound Recorder or any other app you might have on your computer. So we're going to use this sound as the modulator. So let me go back into Reason. I'm going to delete Dr. X. I'm going to bring in Redrum Drum Computer, initialize that, and load up that sample on my desktop.
Report to the...
And we're going to play it from the very first spot here. So selecting that, we're going to trigger it off just like it was a kick drum, but now...
Report to the dance floor. Report to the dance floor.
It'll just keep on rolling around. I could have played this sample from one of the samplers within Reason, but this is just a great way to trigger it and trigger it and trigger it in a loop-like fashion. So let's tab this around. Now, I made a mistake when I dragged in Redrum. I didn't hold down the shift key, so that means it's automatically been connected up to my mixer, right? Into the second input. I don't want that. Let me pull that out. And so now that connection has gone away. And we won't be able to hear it, but we're going to use it as the modulation input in our vocoder. So I'll drag that over here, and we'll flick that back around. And now when we run that, you can see that's our modulation input, and we can actually hear that if we turn the dry wet around to actually hear that. For our instances, I'm going to just boost up that tone.
Report to the dance floor.
I'm sick of that already. Let me just turn that back around here. Boosting up the tone will give us a little bit of a better modulation input here. So with this setup, our carrier, the maelstrom patch up here, is going to be modulated by our vocal sample played back by the Redrum.
The only reason I use the Redrum device is that it's easy to bring up a vocal sample and then just trigger that over and over again. I could have used any of the other samplers, but for our purposes, the Redrum works just fine. Okay, so drum roll please, let's vocode.
We're going to adjust the attack and decay of the sound.
The dance floor, report to the dance floor, report to the dance floor, report to the dance floor.
Even hold the modulator signal. We could shift.
Report to the dance floor, report to the dance floor.
Add some high frequency emphasis.
Report to the dance floor, report to the
And even mix between the dry and wet ratio.
report
To the dance floor. Report to the dance floor.
report to the dance floor.